So what's the biggest takeaway following the Texas Longhorns' massive 56-7 victory over UTSA? For some people out there, it's going to be there is a quarterback conversation that must happen. Arch Manning comes on in and is wheeling and dealing, looks the part of QB1, and Quinn Ewers, thank you for all you've done, but better luck next time. We are not one of those people. I'm going to start the video with this. That's not going to be the case. The big takeaway that most people are missing is Texas is sitting at number 1. And for good reason. They look like the most complete team in college football moving into week 4. So what's going on, SEC Unfiltered? Welcome on into the show. It's Cole Thompson here. Make sure that you like the video, hit the ring notification down below, and of course, hit subscribe. This is your new home for all things SEC. Make sure that you're following us on the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow me on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson. Download the podcast version of the show and check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by RHOBACK. Look good and feel good on game days this fall with RHOBACK.com by using the promo code SECU for $20 off your very first purchase. You want to be dressed to the nine on game days? Do so with RHOBACK.com. So let's go back to the beginning of the game. You're watching as Quinn Ewers is wheeling and dealing. He is absolutely laser focused in. And then comes the injury, and you see him lying on the turf. And immediately your heart just drops if you're a Texas fan. Comes back for this year. He's supposed to be the reason why we are different. He is the difference maker for our team in the SEC. It's over. Go ahead and wave the white flag. Some people I know were automatically saying that it didn't matter what the score was going to be. The year was done if Quinn was out. And then Arch Manning takes the field, and on his very first play, finds DeAndre Moore for a touchdown. And everyone's like, we're back, baby. And that was the case for most of the day. Arch Manning looked the part. 9-12, 223 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, also ran for 53 yards, big 67-yard score, 20.7 miles per hour on the radar. And the kid looked the part. Basically, at this point, if you had any questions about Arch Manning being your long-term starting quarterback, or you thought that nepotism played a role in why he was at Texas, go ahead and eat crow, and go ahead and just come off of that high horse. It's not the case. Arch Manning is really good. And for most of us, we could have told you that Arch Manning was good. He looks the part of a starter. And the bottom line is that if there was anyone else in the country not named Quinn Ewers, this would be the QB1 week 1. You would feel comfortable trotting him out in SEC play, not because of the pedigree of what the Manning name means or him having experience working with 2 potential Hall of Fame uncles. It has to do with the poise, the confidence, and the consistency that you've seen with him underneath Steve Sarkisian. That's really where you talk about this. And so now he's probably going to start. As of this morning, we know that Arch Manning is probably going to be the starter next week against Louisiana Monroe. You also are okay with that. The one thing that you want to do is make sure that you are completely top to bottom bulletproof. You want to feel like a team that can go toe-to-toe with anybody, regardless of where you are, regardless of who you have, regardless of what you're missing or what you're dealing without. And so far, Texas has that. The offensive line was fundamentally sound. The run game has been potent, even without a full-time healthy version of Jaden Blue, without having a quality number 1 in CJ Baxter. Jared Gibson looks well. Colin Page played well. Quintravian Wisner played well. Everything that you saw from this team feels like that they have the depth at the right spots. But for Quinn, it's okay if he misses these next 2 games. You don't need Quinn to go ahead and separate you. But here comes the part that most people are going to be talking about. Well, what happens if Arch starts dealing? If Arch starts dealing, that's great. You want to know what that shows you? Your future is beyond bright on the 40 acres that this is going to be sustainable. You're not losing Steve Sarkisian. You're not losing any of your talented receivers to the portal, like a Ryan Wingo or like a Jonte Cook. You still feel good about the depth of your offensive line. And now it's a plug-and-play replacement for when you got to turn to Arch Manning. But Quinn's your starter. Quinn was balling out in that game. People don't want to pay attention to that because we're all fixated on the here and now. And the here and now says Arch Manning, number 16, the name on the back, looks like a Heisman caliber quarterback, looks like a guy that can be the difference maker for our squad, looks like the guy who can easily carry us deep, deep, deep into an SEC schedule and maybe the college football playoff. But Quinn had 2 touchdown passes. He was 14-16. He had 185 yards. He also was utilizing his legs for a first down gain, 7 yards. He's a reason why you won last week against Michigan. He's the reason why you won a Big 12 title over Oklahoma State. And in the process, he set a Big 12 record. He's the reason why you were able to come back against Washington in the Sugar Bowl and also was a play away from taking you to a national championship. He was the reason. Number 3 is number 1 on the field and number 1 for most people in the Heisman Trophy race, or at least was going into last week because of how he's performed. So you feel good about Arch Manning taking over as the heir apparent of Quinn Ewers. But if Quinn Ewers is healthy, Quinn Ewers is your starter. There's no reason to say that he has been the guy that doesn't take you there. And the other thing that's really important is that Arch is a guy that can probably get you to a college football playoff. You got 12 teams going to the dance. And this is a roster top to bottom that feels complete. It feels like there is a cohesiveness. Nobody is out of place, from the freshmen to the 6-year seniors to the transfers that came on in. It is one mind, one heart, one soul, and one job. And they're all delivering. But you do want that veteran experience when you have to play in the primetime games. Maybe against Red River, against Oklahoma. Maybe a week later when you have to welcome on in Georgia. Those are moments where you want to see a Quinn Ewers out there because of, in my opinion, the way I view this is right now, you're very high on what you see from Arch Manning. And you know that there is a lot of potential. But the potential is probably getting you to a college football playoff. And maybe if you're lucky, you win a couple of games. For Quinn, it's winning a national championship. That is the difference right now. I feel like with Quinn, your opportunities rise even more. The opportunities for you to be this contending team, the number 1 team in the country, that's where you sit. But then the other question that turns to is, well, Colt, they haven't really played anybody. Colorado State just lost to Colorado. Michigan went down to the wire against a lackluster, another opponent in Arkansas State. They don't have a quarterback currently in Ann Arbor. And look at UTSA. They just got thwarted by Texas State the week prior, who went down to the wire with the Big 12 team. And I can't understand where you come from, but it's the depth purposes. It's also the fact that there was no drop-off. Go back and look at how Kentucky played down to the wire with Georgia. Look at how that game was a bloodbath, a back-and-forth defensive bout, and people were starting to question, what does the future look like for Georgia with this roster? Is it more than just a couple of pieces being gone? Is there actually some aura around this team that's going to cost them a win? Talk about Alabama. Alabama dismantled, pulled the exact same thing that Texas did in the Big House in Camp Randall against a Wisconsin team that many people thought had turned the corner. And I don't want to hear that people are going to say, well, Tyler Van Dyke went out. No, it still would have been the exact same outcome. You would have covered the spread. Alabama looked like the complete team. They had their own fair share of struggles currently against a roster at USF back-to-back years. You talk about a team like potentially Ole Miss. They haven't truly played enough competition to where you get a good gauge on them. They haven't gone to a hostile environment. You talk about a team like Tennessee, kind of the same situation. Maybe if you want to go in some capacity, playing at a neutral site field does benefit Nico Iamaleava, even though the run game has been the story. Texas hasn't had to worry about ever dropping the mantle. You look at the way the roster's built. It's so funny. They've gotten bigger. They look like an SEC team. Last year, they were masquerading as a Big 12 team, but they had the SEC aura already attached to it. On top of that, they haven't justifiably taken away the speed element. They still have the power, the physicality, the strength, the speed, and also the technique to be able to go toe-to-toe with anybody. That's what makes them different. And by the way that you look at Alabama and Georgia in years past underneath Kirby and Nick, that's how you have to kind of feel about Steve Sarkisian, where you lose a player, but immediately your mind flips to, oh, we're good. Now, instead of just waiting for him to have a red shirt, we're going to burn it and we're still going to carry the same toe. That's Texas right now. Texas looks complete on both sides of the football. The depth is fundamentally sound. They are complete in every area, and the weak points are all correctable. And by the way, Arch Manning, don't kid yourself that this was a game against UTSA. That performance would have been good against multiple teams in the SEC. Would have been a hammering against Florida. Would have been a massacre against Mississippi State. Would have probably been an absolute eruption against Arkansas on the road, a game that many people are wondering if this is where everything comes crashing down for the Longhorns. Not the way that 16 played, and it's not because of nepotism. It's because of sheer talent. Sometimes you just have a God-given gift, and you get to explore it, and you get to hone it in when you get the right teachers around you. The right teacher and the perfect fit for Arch Manning is Steve Sarkisian. And for Steve Sarkisian, the right quarterback is Arch Manning. The two go toe-and-toe together, and so does the depth behind them. When you lose a guy like Isaiah Bond, when you lose a guy like Gunnar Helm, when you lose a guy like Matthew Golden or a Silas Bolden, you're going to feel really good about Ryan Wingo or Jonte Cook, both of which had either multiple touchdowns or 100+ yards on the day. You also have really good depth on the offensive line and defensive line. That's what separates you as a team, where you're able to turn to your backups, you're able to turn to your second teamers, and you don't notice a difference. Have you seen that with Texas so far? Freshmen acting like seniors, seniors stepping up and delivering. Steve Sarkisian said in Dallas that this was a team that had multiple leaders in the locker room, and you're seeing it. You're seeing it from the very ground up of the newcomers that have entered the building, meeting a standard set by Longhorn country, and the veterans that have been here that understand we were a play away from going to a national championship. And now we want to go ahead and make names in the SEC. We want to be a contender. When you look at the situation, getting Arch Manning comfortable with this offense in case of an injury, a long-term one for Quinn Ewers, is a good thing. If you look at Quinn Ewers, having him be able to rest and be ready for games against Georgia, against an Oklahoma, against a road trip to Arkansas, that's also beneficial for you. So either way, you come away with the win if you're Texas, because of not only is your roster going to be that much more prepared, but you know you can turn to your second gear if you have to. You don't have to go ahead and wave the white flag like some other teams. When you lose a quarterback, when you lose a key player, it might be game over. It's only just the start for Texas. That's what winning programs do. That's what programs in the SEC that have been sustainable have done for years. Turn the page to the next guy, and the next guy doesn't miss a beat. You want to know why Texas is ranked #1 this morning? It's because of the dismantling against UTSA. It's not because of they just feel like a roster that hasn't played anybody. No, it's because of they've turned to their backups and you haven't noticed a drop off. That would have been the same performance that you would have seen from Quinn Ewers that you saw from Arch Manning. That would have been the same performance that you saw from multiple second-team offensive linemen that you saw from the first-team unit. That would have been the same performance you saw from multiple defensive backs that are currently working with the backups than not the starters. Right now, life is pretty damn good down in Austin, and it's only going to get better if Arch Manning continues to improve, because the bottom line, Texas does feel like the team to beat. But let me know in the comment section down below, what are your overall thoughts of Texas, Arch Manning, Steve Sarkisian? Let's also talk about the future of Quinn Ewers. Is this a team that feels like the best in college football? Like, rate, review, subscribe. Make sure you're following us on all the social channels, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow me on Twitter at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work. Make sure that you visit SECUnfiltered.com. I'm Cole Thompson. Until next time, Longhorn Nation. Later.